Aloha, welcome to the Live Ukulele podcast, the very first episode of 2021. 2020 is finally behind us. This is the beginning of season 2 of the Live Ukulele podcast. Season 1 was a great start. Had a lot of fun interviewing a number of my good friends and talented musicians, ukulele players, and hopefully shared some tips with you folks and helped you fill some of your time and bring you some enjoyment. This first episode features one of my very first mentors and friends in music. He was always sort of a guiding light to me and my friends as we were learning to play, and always incredibly encouraging, and comes from kind of a humble music background, which I believe you'll hear about in the interview. But just such a kind man who is always happy to help us learn to jam and learn music and learn to speak it as a language, but also as a language of enjoyment, of just, inclusiveness and bringing everybody together and just having a good time playing music. And this interview was recorded on my birthday last year, actually, because I thought there's nobody in the world I would rather talk to on my birthday than Konabob Stoffer. Konabob actually invented the walking bass, which is a 3-string nylon string bass, it's up kind of an upright fretless bass, but tuned to an open tuning, so it's very accessible for people who aren't very experienced with music. And he brought this bass into many different homes of folks that hadn't had musical experience in the past, but he taught them how to play the walking bass and got them started in music. He's also a steel guitar player who plays just a lovely touch for Hawaiian music, and he was always kind of the decoration man at different jams I'd go to. It's like, take a solo, Konabob, and he'd go off and play a lovely steel guitar solo. He's actually not really an ukulele player, but just because of who he is and how he sort of speaks this common language between all people and helps them get over their insecurities and just really encourages them to jump into the music, I feel like Konabob is a very appropriate person to talk to on this podcast. So I hope you enjoy hearing what he has to share as much as I enjoyed hearing it. We had a little bit of trouble with Zoom dropping out on us a couple times, so you'll hear the original mic'd audio pop in from time to time to cover those holes. Otherwise, I present to you my good friend and mentor, Mr. Konabob Stoffer.
Well, let me tell you, this has been, from the very beginning of the year, the most interesting year I have ever experienced. And, sometimes just because something is hard doesn't mean it's bad. It's been a hard year, I know, for a lot of people, perhaps because I retired this year. It wasn't so rough on me, but at the beginning of the year in March, the first week of March was Aloha Music Camp, which I've been the production manager for about a dozen years. And it's been great. I get to play with a lot of good musicians, and Herbota, I'm sure. We would sneak off to little rooms and play music together, and it was fun. But let's see. So we got to Aloha Music Camp, and one of the things that happened that was the most fascinating thing, Keola wanted to do something very special, and it just turned out that Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel had moved to Maui.
Okay.
And they had made a connection. So he invited Paul Simon to come to Aloha Music Camp. It was over on Kauai. The Paul Simon shows up. I was the one that went to the airport to pick him up. And that was kind of cool. But anyway, he gave a talk and a demonstration for the whole camp. He talked about guitars and how he writes songs. he talked about something he always likes, and I had never thought about this, but he said his favorite chords have the third of the chord on the top. He said, I don't
Highest
know
or
why.
lowest?
The highest note in the chord is the third
Okay.
on most of his really favorite chords. So I'm passing that along. That's I've been fooling around with that too. It's kind of fun. But one of the things that he said that was really interesting, he said that he is no longer looking at himself as a musician. He said, I look at music as what got me to where I am right now. And he said, if I continue to do music, fine. If I don't continue to do music, fine. I am what I am, or something of that nature. It was just beautiful. And, it struck a lot of us. Certainly, I saw myself as a musician for a certain part of my life. And before that, I was like an aspiring musician. And before that, I was a wannabe musician. And before that, I didn't even have a clue. I just listened to records. So now I can see what he was talking about. I've gone through all these different parts of my life. And now this with COVID, it made it very easy. I just was like, no, I'm not going to go play at bars. I'm not going to go at restaurants where people are, coming in and everything like that. So I, for a while, I was still seeing many of my musician friends trying to keep up the life, playing at bars, traveling to Oahu to perform, coming back. And several of them did catch the virus. Fortunately, none of them that I know died of the virus, but I certainly, I see myself as just a guy who's enjoying his life, trying to keep it simple. How's that?
That is so perfect. And that's one of the things I've always admired about you is from the beginning, and I'm sure, we're all on our journey, so I'm sure you've come a ways. But even from when we first met, you always seemed so content and happy with what you had and what you were doing. Like I first met Konabob at Kyoki Kahumoku's workshop down in Pahala, Hawaii, or somewhere thereabouts. That's when we first really started spending some extended time together and hanging out. And he was playing his walking bass. It's just a three string stick bass tuned to a major chord, and that was very accessible for people who weren't really musicians to just jump in and start playing some simple bass lines. And he also played steel guitar as his two main instruments. But just throughout hanging with him, he was always so encouraging to everybody who would drop by and be part of his classes or part of his jam sessions, to just like really zero judgment and such a safe space that you don't see a whole lot. I mean, even in the Hawaiian music context, which it's so welcoming to everybody, you kind of took it up another level of just trying to share with everybody the fact that, just playing a straight, steel bar chord across all the strings can be so fulfilling if you just enjoy it the right way.
That's very interesting. I wonder if because I came to music late in my life, I don't think I started playing I didn't start playing the steel guitar until I was like 42 or something like that. And certainly before that, though I played the harmonica, I didn't consider that a viable instrument. Sorry to those of you who play the harmonica, but it wasn't till late in my life that I started performing. And so I know what it's like to feel the desire to jump in and have fun and play music. And certainly back there at Keoki's camp, it was just fascinating to see all these young people come in and just really jump in there with both feet and just even when there were no classes going on, you guys were always running around playing your chords and sitting in little groups playing your chords and stuff. Oh, I was going to say, when you hold up your hand,
Which one?
either one, doesn't matter. I was just trying to remember. Okay, it wasn't you I was thinking of. It was your friend Isaac,
Mm-hmm.
who had such long, skinny fingers, kind of like Jeff Peterson, the guitarist. And I was like, man, what an advantage he has. Although, when I thought about it further, it's like the people that have the real advantage are the people like yourself who are really have a love for music in your heart, and it really pulls you in. And I'm so grateful that that happened to me.
I feel like a lot of times folks who are playing have kind of high expectations for themselves. Have you ever experienced that yourself? And what has been your kind of problem solving to work through that and just be happy with what you do play and what you can play?
Yes. Okay. All right. So the guy that taught me or got me started, he wasn't actually a teacher, but I went up and asked him about the steel guitar. Ken Emerson, probably one of the most fantastic steel guitar players anyone would ever meet.
Mm-hmm.
I would listen to him play. I would hear myself play, and I'd be like, oh man, there are miles between us. He is so good, and I am such a beginner. But I would play with my friends, which is this group of Hawaiian kupuna, the elders who would hang out at the shopping center, and they would play 5 or 6 different songs. That's all they knew was those 5 or 6 songs. Every one of them was in the key of C, which made it easy for me. But I would sit behind them with my steel guitar and try to find things that sounded good. Every once in a while, the little old lady would turn around, look at me and go, turn it up, Bobby, turn it up. And so I'd turn it up. And after a while, people would come over and they'd be like really happy to hear the steel guitar. And finally, one day I said to myself, you don't have to be as good as Ken Emerson. He has a style. He started when he was in his teens. You have a style. You started when you're in your 40s. It would be very unlikely that you would develop the same qualities that he does. And I didn't, but I gave myself a little pep talk. I said, when you play, people seem to be happy. They like what you're playing. So you've got that Konabob sound, and people seem to like it. From that point on, it was like, okay, I've got my own sound. People like it. What more can I ask from life?
Right. That's such a profound leap, and I wish that for anybody who's playing music to be able to get to that place of just, yes, this is what I do, for better or for worse, right?
So I'll tell you one other thing that a defining moment in my musical career. I made that bass. I invented that bass, and I started playing it. I had a terrible sense of rhythm, so I relied on the ukulele player. And I would always hang out with ukulele players that had a very solid sense of rhythm. And fortunately, in Hawaiian music, that is not rare. Most Hawaiian musicians have a fairly good sense of rhythm. I think because Hawaiian music doesn't have drums, and often they don't even have a bass player. But so there's a sense of rhythm, and I hung around these guys. My sense of rhythm got better and better and better. And at one point, I was down on Ali'i Drive at Fisherman's Wharf or whatever that thing with the big blue building, big blue roof building. We were playing Shirley was playing fiddle. I was playing bass, and Bobby Koanui was playing ukulele and singing. And as I was playing, I looked around and I noticed some people watching us and things like that. And then I looked back over, and finally I realized I wasn't thinking about the bass. My hand was playing it for me. I was looking around. My awareness was out here, but there was some other part of my awareness that wasn't the same that was doing all the music. And it was perfect. It was like good rhythm. And that moment of wow, if you get comfortable enough and you let your body do the work, it will do the work. And I think really this is how, really good musicians, that their body will just do whatever their mind is able to come up with. You for yourself, if in your mind you hear an amazing run, your hands will just do it for you. You don't really have to study it, move by move. Your hands will do it for you. And I think that is a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it is, because that's, for the most part, as a teacher, that's where you're trying to get your students, is to that place of comfort. And it's so simple and easy, but at the same time, it's as complex as the human mind. So it's like, how in the world would you ever break it down?
Yes. Well, I am fortunate in that years ago, maybe I was 20 years old, I started practicing meditation. Um, I found a group that didn't seem to be particularly religiously oriented. They were just meditation oriented, and like studying the mind and working to understand how the mind works and the different parts of the mind. And it wasn't a matter of studying it with my reading books or understanding, but it was a matter of doing meditation to the point where after a while you start going, oh yeah, look at that. Your mind, it just keeps going along. And there's another part of you that can just watch it as it goes along. If you can make that separation, then it's the same thing with having your body playing the bass while your mind watches it play the bass. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Is that how would you recommend somebody who is interested in that incorporate the two practices? Is it possible? Because I know you've obviously worked on this for many years, but for somebody who might be starting out and feeling like, gee, I can't just get to that comfort level the normal way.
Easy way to start is just to make yourself sit down for 10 minutes and tell yourself, I'm not going to move for 10 minutes. During that 10 minutes, you just watch what your mind goes into. Just watch it. It's like, oh, I just caught myself thinking about what I'm going to do when I stand back up. Oh, I just thought myself what I'm going to do to have dinner tonight. You think of these little things and then you draw back so that you start understanding there's the part of your mind that is diddling around here, what the Buddhists usually refer to as the monkey mind. And then there's this part of your mind that stands back and watches it. If you can make that for 10 minutes, do that for a month, you'd be surprised. Kick it up to 15 minutes, see what happens.
That's great. It's so simple. Usually you think of meditation as being some really complex thing you have to like train and condition for, but that seems very accessible.
It is quite accessible, and it's really it's the heart of meditation. I mean, I've heard the Dalai Lama talk about it. I've heard lots of different teachers talk about it. And, this relates to music in the way that I mentioned. the ability to watch yourself from a higher place as you play your music. When you can't do that, you're afraid. It's because you're afraid that you won't let yourself take risks on that fretboard. You won't be a good musician because you're afraid. To get over the fear, you have to not be afraid of your mind.
That's classic. I find sometimes that the fear actually comes like later when you realize, like, oh my gosh, I just played that whole thing and I watched myself do it without any trying, right? There's zero effort. You're just kind of doing it on autopilot. In that moment where you kind of snap out of it and you realize what has passed. I mean, obviously you want to try and ride it as far as possible, but then in that moment, it's kind of like, you know, when you like slip on something and your body goes straight and you try and stand up straight for some reason. That's kind of what it feels like when you're on stage and you're riding that wave, and then you realize you're riding that wave, and it's like, oh, but it was fine before. Why can't it be fine still?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was talking about. You are exactly matched what I was talking about. It's the most amazing part of music is not coming from, well, I mean, we all start out looking at a piece of paper and strumming chords and trying to play along. Okay, that's music level 101. At a certain point, you get to the point where you can strum and play without the piece of paper. And Lord knows, some of us take years to get to that point. But that's giving up or relaxing one part of you, the part of you that wants to have the visual feedback of the piece of paper, right? The next level is you start realizing the chord is not just a chord, but it's a bunch of notes, and that you can fool around with those notes, right? You can say, well, I'm going to leave that one out. How does that sound? Or I'm going to add another one in and see, how does that sound? And then it becomes really exciting. But then the next level up, and that's learning to give up the idea that a song is a bunch of chords. It's not. A song is way more than that. A really good song will take you right out of yourself. I mean, you heard a song that just makes your spirit soar. It's like, those are the rare moments. And when that happens, when you can play like that, it's because you've gotten out of the way. Your higher nature comes shining through, and my God, how did he do that?
Well, that's fabulous stuff that I don't think gets nearly enough attention from people who are playing something that I often get frustrated with is the attachment to the paper with people I'm teaching. They can't focus until you give them a handout, right? And but I've found over the years that the times when I teach something without the handout, it's like, I'll give it to you later, I promise. And I teach it to them and they learn to play it, and they're working with their ears more than their eyes, is that they play it better. And then you give them the handout and it all goes off the rails.
Right.
Which is super, super fascinating to me. And then if you take it kind of, that next level is the getting out of the way part, where you just let it happen. And do you feel that comes only once you've developed the skill quite a ways, or is that a place that even a beginner can find?
Oh, a beginner can fall into it. And I have started using this trick when I've got a beginner. I teach them D7 and C, D7 and C. And we'll do 8 strums of D7, 8 strums of C. We'll just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then when they are doing the D7 and C, I start noodling around. And then we switch. I do the D7 and C, and I let them noodle around. And then they're like nervous at first, very nervous. But, you know, you do that for 20 minutes at a time. And by the end of that time, they're discovering, even if I make a mistake, I can get right back on track on the next beat, and it's going to sound really great. I always tell them, look, this is how the Grateful Dead made all of their money. They just played 2 chords on most of their songs, are 2-chord jams, and they are just so much fun to get into.
And so the fear goes away just from like the brute force of comfort in the environment of music.
If it's only 2 chords, and your body will feel when it's time to go back and forth. You can't get lost. With a 3-chord song, it's more complex. You're like, oh, am I going to the F or am I going to the G? Oh, I don't know what to do. And they'll freeze up. So you stick with a 2-chord song. And if it's a jam, then there's nothing that can be wrong because it's their jam. They're not trying to be somebody else. They're themselves.
And that's something that even if you don't have a jam buddy, you can do yourself these days pretty easily with like a voice memo on your phone. You could record yourself playing for 5 or 10 minutes, playing the chords, and then you listen back and play along with yourself.
Excellent. That's a great thing. That's a great thing.
Have you read The Music Lesson by Victor Wooten?
No, I met Victor when he was in Waimea. I haven't read his book. I'm sure it's great. He's such a fascinating guy. He's very friendly, and he was fascinated with the 3-string bass, but I think he was like, it's cool, but there's not enough strings for me to do what I want to do. And Nathan Aviao said to me, would you make me a 5-string bass? I was like, sorry, bro. It's not what I do.
It's kind of
anyway. Tell me about Victor.
Well, he's put together this book. I was probably 10 or more years ago that he wrote this, but it's basically like a fiction book, but it's like about a version of himself learning kind of the things that you've been talking about in music from kind of a spiritual Eastern standpoint of not necessarily the notes and the motions that you use to play, but all the kind of the behind the scenes back mind stuff. And each chapter is dedicated to a certain facet of music. And he has a teacher, Michael, who comes and guides him to these different things. And he meets different people who are skilled at different parts of music. And it's just very, very heartwarming and fascinating to kind of see all the stuff that's never talked about and stuff that's so important and doesn't get the attention because people are, they're used to learning notes or chords off of a sheet of paper, and that's fine. But there's also like what you do with those notes and chords on the paper and how you express them and the dynamics and the technique and the flow of everything. And he also talks about music as being kind of like a living thing. So anytime like in the book when music is mentioned, it's always capital M, music herself kind of a thing. It just strikes me as something that you would enjoy.
I'm sure. And you made me think of something that for me, it's been years since I really sat down and listened to music. I'm sorry to say, if I'm not playing music with somebody else, I'm not getting to stretch that part of myself that likes to separate. So, I mean, if I sit down and listen to music, it's true, you can separate in a certain way where a really good piece of music can lift you out of yourself in a certain way, but it's not your spiritual muscles doing the work. It's their spiritual muscles lifting you up, right? But if you sit down and play music with somebody who you're really in tune with, and musicians, I've met many, many musicians, and now I feel when I meet a musician, I start playing with them, I feel like, am I in tune with this person? Are we really connecting, or is it kind of like two guys just playing in chairs next to each other without any real connection?
Yeah.
There is such a difference. I'm sure you know
Absolutely.
this to be the case. But yeah, and when you are in tune with somebody, there's a magic that really is just splendid, and it makes the music splendid. And I could just talk about that for a long time.
Well, and that seems like it's something that builds over time as you play with somebody. Like I've noticed that with certain musicians where you first play with them and you're kind of like butting heads, especially with like timing kinds of stuff, because you don't know their feel and you don't know where they're going. But if you play with somebody for a couple of years, you get to a point where it's just like putting on a glove. Like Isaac comes home from school and we'll get together and jam, and it's so easy. It's just like, he's, it's like steering a canoe and being in a canoe team with him, and you just hop right back in, and you're so used to that, and just you can make music so easily when you have a person like that. But
I'm very grateful that you're playing with Isaac. I really thought he was a very sensitive man. Both of you guys have a sensitivity that always impressed me. So I'm glad you're playing together.
yeah, he's out in Purdue, Indiana, going to school. He's in the PhD program for English.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, it's like I don't really get what he's doing out there, because he comes home and I play with him, and it's like, there's no one I would rather play with. This is my guy. He's in my band, except he doesn't live here.
Yeah. That's so cool. There's a video on YouTube of me playing Little Village Church, or Church in a Small Hawaiian Town. That.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm playing with Eke Keikau Oha. We had only been playing a few times, and I just happened to turn on my recording device. I think it was my phone. And we sat down and we started playing it. It sounds like we've practiced it for a long time. There's a lot of really good music on that track, that it just happened to come through us. And I think it was because he and I just had a certain ability to connect on an emotional level. And I don't really understand why. I haven't been playing with him for years because eventually he became fascinated with loopers. And it's a recording that I just happened to, it was before our regular gig. We just sat down, nobody was there. I turned on my phone and we just recorded it. And we had not practiced. It was just because of the type of guitarist he was and the type of steel guitarist I was, the music just joined together and sounded just fabulous to me. But it was one of those magic moments when, because we weren't in front of an audience, maybe we were just glad to be there, and it was a beautiful, relaxing thing by the ocean. We made some nice music, and I've always enjoyed that track.
Nice. Well, I recall, along with your many talents of getting people started in music, that you had a way of getting people engaged and in time easier than maybe other teachers would. And I'm not quite sure how you would do it, because it seems to me that timing is one of the main things that people struggle with when they're getting into music, because they're so excited they want to rush everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on cultivating a positive rhythm.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, like, one of the first songs that I, down at karaoke's thing, one of the first songs that I always would start people out on the bass with was my ripoff of the Hank Williams song, Goodbye Joe, right?
Right.
2 chords, again, C and G. Okay, so the bass player only had to learn to put his finger down on the C line and take it off to play the G line. And because it's got a rhythm and everybody knows the song inherently because it's been around forever, it made it very easy. And because it's got a strong rhythm, it was easy for everybody to join in. And remember, there would be like 10, 12 people there jamming away. With a good bass player, it gives a group of ukuleles an advantage, I think, which is one of the reasons I was so excited to start making those things and trying to get them out to ukulele groups. And I think, 90% of the ones I made went to either ukulele groups or a husband and wife that played ukulele. The ukulele and the bass are so far apart from each other in the scale, the ukulele is way up there and the bass is way down there. They're never in each other's way. And it makes it quite easy for them to play along together. One of the other things I learned as a bass player was there's a tremendous amount of power in being a bass player. You play bass too, don't you?
Just enough to fake it.
Okay. If you're with a group of people and you're playing bass, and somebody tries to drift off the rhythm, the bass player will not let it happen. If the bass player keeps his rhythm, that person who's speeding up will slow back down, or the person who's slowing down will speed back up, just because the bass is there at the bottom and your body responds to bass in a way that your conscious mind may not even be aware of, which is why, and it's the same with drums. I mean, you can't imagine going someplace to have a big dance party and the band not having a drum, right? Or a good solid bass, because the physical body likes those low notes. The mind likes the high notes. When you go to see a concert, your mind is listening to the lyrics and listening to the lead guitar show off and do his stuff. Meanwhile, your body is dancing to the bass and the drum. They're 2 separate parts of the mind, and it's fascinating to experience that as a bass player.
So what can an ukulele player do to better sync up with a bass or the rest of the band? Because you've spent lots of time trying to rope ukulele players into your timing as the bass player. And in a way, you, like you said, you have that power and it's easy, but I'm sure.
Yeah, the easy thing for the bass player is by doing a walk up or a walk down, it's telling subliminal messages to the ukulele players exactly when to hit the next chord. Because you hear the G, A, B, you know that the next thing is you better be on that C right when that bass player hits that C. So walk ups and walk downs. And that's something also that an ukulele player, if you're doing a lead, you can also lead other ukulele players by your walk-ups and walk-downs, because it lets the other person know what's coming. It's harder with the high notes because they're listening to that with their mind. With the low notes, they're listening to it with their body. Yeah, for real. It's amazing.
It's true.
It's very true.
It's like when the doctor taps on your knee with the hammer and it goes bloop.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Just like, gotta change that chord because the bass is telling me to.
Yes, that's right. So what can the ukulele player do? The ukulele player can try tapping their foot. That's always been, Bob Brosman told me that years ago. It's like, if you don't have some part of your physical body moving, it will be a lot harder for you to keep the rhythm. He said, of course, for a steel guitar player, if you've got your guitar on your lap and you're tapping your foot, it's going to make it hard on you to play the steel guitar. But the ukulele, it's very easy. You tap your foot, your ukulele playing will always sync up much more correctly with the rest of the band.
Well, that's great. Lots of things for people to chew on and think about.
That's great. I'm really enjoyed talking to you, Brad. You're a real inspiration.
Well, I'm glad I get to share your wisdom with my people, because growing up kind of in your safe area of just jamming music and all the encouragement you always gave us was so, inspiring and powerful and empowering for us up and comers to, like, just play, just get out of your own way and play some music.
Okay, now here's something. Let me ask you this.
Okay.
Do you ever ask yourself, what is my life going to be like 5 years from now?
Every once in a while.
Yeah, I think if the more you do that, the more prepared you are when that next 5 years comes through. So what will music be like in 5 years? Let's say COVID disappears. Are we going to be doing exactly what we did last year? Or will it have moved on to something else? Will people be so hungry to get out of their houses that live music will become a thing again? Wouldn't that be sweet?
That'd be awesome. It seems like Zoom has opened up a lot of new opportunities as well, and people realizing that, I never see you. And then kind of COVID and the podcast has given us an excuse to, like, catch up on this interview. I think there are lots of moments like that we have been given that we wouldn't have picked up on before.
All right. Well, I circling back to the beginning of Paul Simon saying, my music has gotten to me where I am right now, this moment. I am who I am in large part because of how music got me to the place where I am right now. But does that mean that I am tied into being a musician and just doing what I've always done? Or is there something else coming? You never know.
You never know.
You never know.
Just got to stay tuned and keep on keeping on.
All right, Brad.
Okay. Good to see you, Konabob.
All right. Take care, Brad. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Be sure to subscribe to the Live Ukulele podcast on your favorite podcast subscription service, Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio or Anchor, whatever you choose to use. And you can also listen to it on liveukulele.com if none of that is your cup of tea. A new show is published on the first and third Saturdays of the month. Going to continue that tradition through this new year. I hope it finds you in good health and happiness and joyful music. I'll see you in the next episode. Be safe out there, take care of one another, and keep playing those ukuleles. Aloha.